Okay. Okay, are we running? Are we running? Are we going to break again like last week? Yes, no, maybe. Let's see, shall we? I think the delay should have gone. Everything's cool. Okay. Well, hello guys, it's Friday again. Welcome back. Not that there's anyone here right at this moment, but hey ho, I'm assuming that someone will turn up eventually at some point. But I hope you've had a good week. It's been a bit of a rough one. I can't speak English. Been a bit of a rough one for me, and that's probably a contributing factor to not being able to speak English. But hey, so this last week we've been talking about rather than just the focusing on sex, we've been looking at the more general complaints and things around relationships. We had some bits and pieces around complaints in relationships relating specifically to sex. We had more general, common complaints about relationships. But then also on top of that, I did 5 behaviours to avoid the. I'd done similar videos like that in the past with similar content, but there were a few things that I felt I missed out, and so especially when I was doing those other videos the other day, and I was just kind of going through, going, did I talk about that before? Have I talked about these things before? I should probably talk about these things again, either way. So that went into that video, and then I wanted. I don't know exactly how well this landed, but I wanted to do another video on the differences between guys and girls in regards to sexuality, even though we can inhabit the same space along the sexuality spectrum, as it were. I wanted to make that video just as another way to highlight, not necessarily to go, oh, well, this is this and that's that in regards to guys and girls, but just to go, look, it doesn't matter who you are, your perceptions on a level of your body just makes you feel this way or perceive this thing in this way is different, not just from person to person, but it's or rather not just from kind of demographic to demographic, but also from person to person. So it's like that's one of the things that's always been kind of fascinating to me, because especially when I've sat down with friends and we've been talking about relationships, or we've been talking about this or that or the other, or even when I've been talking to clients about it, and I might be talking to one of my male friends, and we are both straight men, and yet his perception of the specifics within a relationship versus my own are still going to be kind of pretty substantial overall. There are going to be those big differences one way or the other, just not even on like how straight we are or what kind of person we're into or anything like that. We could be very, very in line thinking wise, but it still comes down to like there'll just be these little things, and for instance it'll be a case of what turns you on, what you find attractive. You could look at one person. I remember having a conversation actually about a teacher that we had in school, and she was a young teacher. She was in her 20s. She wasn't that much past just being a student teacher. We were in a couple of her classes, and as a result, it was a case of when we were talking about, oh, well, which teachers do you find attractive? Which ones are just pretty? Which ones are hot? And I remember raising this teacher's name and going, well, her. young, attractive, why not? And yet, in my case, I thought we were talking about attractiveness on a more physical side of things, in which case, yeah, there was me going that. And some of the other guys were like, oh, no, man, because she's cold. She's cold and she's just unresponsive. She doesn't like. And I'm like, hold on. So my perception for that conversation was because we weren't going to go and chat these teachers up or anything. That would have been impossible. But or at least incredibly unlikely, and illegal. Come to think of it, but it's a case of my perception at that younger point in that conversation, in that context of just comparing what we liked, which is an important conversation to have among friends, to find your baseline, to have that appreciation of what you like versus what other people like, where the differences are, how you are you. But in that context where we were just talking about kind of just a straightforward attractiveness, a passing glance kind of thing. And there were a couple of guys in that group that were having this conversation who just couldn't get over the fact that her personality had an impact on the way that they perceived her. And so again, that highlights an element there that they have that holds them up, and that alters their perception on something that's not necessarily very well defined. Whilst now, especially from some of the experiences that I've had, if you turned around to me and said, would I find someone attractive in terms of going and dating them without knowing anything about them, or even just going out with them, one night stands, whatever else, if that was ever a question leveled in my direction again nowadays, I'd be like, no, I'd need to know more. I'd need to get into their head. I'd need to have that conversation back and forth, because otherwise it's not going to work. It's just not going to happen. And so, it's all of those changes in perception have even happened over time. And so it's one of those things to take into account when looking at other people's relationships and things, because it's a case of going, yeah, you need to reserve the judgment and the negativity and the imposing your own thoughts on other people when their relationship is off doing their own thing. But also when it comes to being in a relationship with another person, yeah, it's still crazy important to, as I've said time and time again over the last 3 weeks now nearly, you need to sit down and have those conversations. You need to share your thoughts, share your feelings, share your experiences with anyone that you're in that relationship with. There has to be an openness, a trust, which is possibly a word that is foreshadowing for the videos I'm doing this coming week. But it's important to share those things, because you a guy and a girl who are both heterosexual, yeah, they are both technically in the same place on the whole spectrum of sexuality, from heterosexual to homosexual, and yet their perceptions, their experiences are going to be almost completely counter. Their wants, desires, the things that get them going, the things that they want from it, all of the good things, all the bad things, all the stuff that's kind of grey and might be good to one person but bad to another. All of those things are going to be completely different. And the only way that we can learn what those things are so we can make the most of them is by having those conversations, interacting, learning from each other, all that stuff. And that kind of has me backpedal to the video that I did on negative behaviours, on 5 relationship behaviours that are just bad, that you should avoid, that you can try and monitor yourself on and step back from. And it's like one of the points on that list, which I think was 3rd or 4th point, was unintentional selfishness, trying to avoid and just keep track of the fact that you are inquiring after the person that you're in a relationship with, that you're interacting with, that you claim to care about, because otherwise you're not going to learn anything, but also it's not showing that you care. And so as a result, thinking around that, again, taking from my personal experience, there was a time where I was a lot less open, and I was a lot shyer in the way that I interacted with the world. And I've talked about this before in other videos as well. But when I was in that kind of shy state of mind, a lot of the time I would be like, no one wants to know how I feel. I will tell people if I feel bad. But as a result, that would then translate in my head to, because I wasn't completely comfortable with talking to people, asking people questions, and doing stuff with them anyway. It was a case of going, right, well, if other people, if they've got something wrong with them, or if there's a situation that they need help with or they want to talk about, they'll tell me. And in a lot of cases they did, because I was willing to sit and listen. But it was a case of, yeah, if they have that, they'll come and tell me. And so I wouldn't ever ask after people, really. I'd ask maybe, oh, how's your family doing? How's this? How's that? But on a more day-to-day, just checking in with your friends, asking how they're doing, all that kind of thing, I wouldn't do it. And so as a result, at times even, at times back then, I would kind of catch myself and go, should I ask? And then because the conversation was rolling on whilst I was considering it in my head, then it would roll on too far and the moment would have gone, and so I wouldn't end up asking anyway, even if I had had that moment of going, I kind of care about how this person's doing, should I ask? Because I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to make a conversation more awkward and have me kind of recoil from it. Nowadays I don't care, so I just ask whatever, and it's, if you want to answer, you can answer. If you don't, then you don't. Either way, I've made my inquiry. I've checked in. I've done what I can, and then if you want to share, you can share. But it's a case of back then there were a couple of experiences that I had, including one at the end of a very bad relationship, all told, which then had me kind of wake up to, do you know what? I don't ask enough. And this was at the time when I was realizing that I wasn't necessarily lacking in confidence or capacity or people skills or anything like that. I just needed to actually use them and not be afraid of using them. And so as a result, it was me being able to go, right, well, yeah, I'm going to ask. I'm going to check in. I'm not going to be closed off and unintentionally selfish. Because that, I didn't feel like I was being selfish at the time and all the rest of it. So that unintentional selfishness part, you need to try and, it's one of the things that I think is most pervasive from the behaviours that we were talking about earlier this week, because that as a behaviour is more just kind of keeping to yourself and not necessarily wanting to intrude, even if there's a lot of space for you to kind of take a couple of steps towards someone without it being intrusive. So when we're talking about people's different perceptions and people's different experiences and how people are interacting, then it's important to still jump in, get involved, and have those conversations. Not be afraid to ask those questions. Not if you let yourself get paralyzed by the potential responses that you're going to get, then there's also no way of getting to the point that you can be happy, that you can be open with each other, that when there's a problem you can get past it. Because thinking back about some of the things that we've been talking about in regards to complaints and issues and things like that, it's the solution is always going to involve communication, because the situation itself that has spawned that problem involves more than one person. In which case, being selfish, be it intentional or otherwise, and kind of holding back from inquiring and checking on people and making sure that you're showing care and all that kind of thing is just going to prevent you from asking those questions anyway. But then when it comes to those differences in perspective and opinion, you, rather than being afraid of the responses you're going to get, maybe take that moment before asking, just a second or two, and go, I might not get an answer that's great here, but I need to expect that. Because then you might still be surprised by the answers that you're getting or the things that people are telling you. But if you're kind of expectant of it, if you're braced, ready for whatever it is that comes out of that other person's mouth, then hopefully you've mentally prepared yourself enough just to keep you calm, stay on the level. And so as a result, then that moment of caring, of being somewhat more conscientious, maybe, that allows you to ask, the appreciation of everyone being different, and not, being expectant of an answer, but not necessarily expectant of the specific answer that you want or would hope for. Those two things by themselves together are a great way of making headway into that communication that we've talked about in almost every video for the last 3 weeks. But it's like a lot of the other complaints and problems that we had on the various lists that I've done this week. They all come down to talking it out. And it all comes down to being aware of it to begin with, which if you are monitoring yourself, then that's fine. If you're both monitoring yourselves and your relationship, then that's great. But if only one of you is monitoring and keeping check on what's going on, or if neither of you are, then that can lead to a bit of a problem. One of the complaints that was on the more general relationship complaints that we took a look at this week included not wanting to argue because you'd be afraid of the friction it would cause, but also uneven effort in a relationship. And that uneven effort is kind of what I was just mentioning, where you've got only one person monitoring what's going on in the relationship and the other one just kind of cruising through. Both people need to be paying attention, and sometimes it can be hard. One of the other things that was mentioned in the behaviours to avoid was the unbalance between kind of career and your interactions for your career and your relationship, and trying to grow those things at the same kind of pace. But if you've got that split effort into all kinds of different places, you, as we were saying about confidence the other week, you've got one reservoir for your energy, for your confidence, for pretty much all of the energy you exert on fear, for how aware you can be, for all of your positive and negative emotions and internal interactions. It all comes from one set place within you for each thing, which is why confidence in the bedroom versus confidence in the boardroom versus confidence doing the hobby that you love, and confidence with family, confidence with friends, all of those different aspects, different applications of confidence as a thing that we can project onto the world. It all stems from one place, and so it's just finding the way to open the doors to allow it to kind of flood out in the different directions. Which is why, again, if you're really confident doing what you love or doing your work, but then you have a lot of concerns and worries and upsets around confidence or self-consciousness in the bedroom, as per some of the stuff that we were talking about last week, it kind of boils down to there have to be ways that you can find that confidence that you have anywhere else. The question that I would usually pose would be, say someone's lacking in confidence in their performance ability in the bedroom. Well, fine, but you're not going to be completely confident in your performance ability at work all the time. But how is it that you're still able to maintain that level of confidence and consistency and all that kind of stuff? The answer to that question, how you're able to maintain it, even if it's something like, well, I just fake it, I just smile and carry on until we get to the right point and I feel better about it, and then I can actually get back on top of it and do what I need to do. Even if that's your answer, it's still an answer that will kind of carry across. You know, oh, well, I'm not confident in the bedroom. Fine, but you know how everything works, right? Yeah, yeah, I know how everything works. Well, fine, then what is it that stops you from just carrying on, faking it till you're making it? Relaxing and enjoying might be a thing as well, you know, just to get you to where you then feel more comfortable again, and then you can get back in control of what you're doing and kind of take a more active part in the next steps of whatever interaction it is that you're going through. You know, it all has that transferable skill kind of element to it. And so again, when we're talking about uneven effort, when we're talking about lack of kind of compulsion to deal with conflict, or even if it's just a fear of conflict generally. Did a video on conflict resolution and kind of getting past the fear of conflict a long while ago. But it's all a case of, you know, you need to have those conversations to address that. And so, you know, if you're having difficulty having conversations around that one area, well, fine, how do you have conversations about anything else? If you're in a relationship that doesn't really sit down and have conversations about anything at any point, then that might be a bit of an indicator that there's some kind of problem there. But if you guys can sit down and have a great conversation about the TV that you've watched, or about the things that have been happening at work, or how family is doing, or any of that stuff, then you should be able to find ways, find avenues by which to reach a good conversation around effort. Who's exerting the more effort? Who's exerting less effort? How do you address the balance? You know, and getting past that concern about it becoming an argument. I mean, there are times when I've seen people in a relationship go, oh, well, we're arguing, and then the other part of the relationship, the other person will go, no, we're not. We're having a discussion. It's an important discussion. It's serious. And it might even get a little heated, but it's a discussion. We're not arguing. We're finding a solution. But because one person decides to label it as an argument because of whatever they've associated with it as a kid, whatever they've internalized from previous relationships, you know, all that kind of stuff. Again, one thing that I would say, and I think I said it in that video the other day, was, you know, in regards to arguments, even the best and most together and most exemplary couples have arguments. They have to, because everyone's different. They are always going to eventually find things that they're on different sides of, and so they're going to engage in that discussion, and that might become heated, it might become negative, but it doesn't need to remain that way. It can be a moment of negativity that then passes and continues on to good things. You know, as I also said an absolute ton in all of the videos that I've done, you know, conflict is how we grow. So, you know, if we're conflicting, if we're kind of bumping up against our environment and it's testing us, if we're pushing our way outside of our comfort zone and kind of stretching and pushing against whatever it is that could be constraining us, then, you know, we're going to come out stronger, we're going to come out better, we're going to come out with more learned out the other side of it than not. So who would you prefer to or who wouldn't let me rephrase this, because my tongue has stopped working and brain isn't too far behind. But if you're really caring for that person that you're with, then who better to go through the process of learning, of growing stronger, of becoming a better version of you, enjoying a better interaction with that person? You know, who would be better than the person that you claim to love or care for, or, you know, any of those things, have affectionate feelings for? So, you know, it's one of those things that you need to keep track of, I guess. And then that you know, it carries over into the one big complaint, which was a big surprise to me actually when making the general relationship complaints video with its 7 points on it. When I was doing the research for it, I was really surprised that just delays in messaging was such a high thing on the list nowadays. I would have still thought that there are a lot of people who, yeah, we want those messages, we want those interactions, we want those conversations. But especially when people are working, or when you've got kind of other stuff going on, like, I could understand if it was like so and so said that when they finished work they would call me, they would message me, they would send me an email, they would interact with me within that instant, and then they didn't, and I was left waiting, wondering what would happen, why they hadn't contacted me, and all the rest of it. I can understand if it was like, oh, they have they have given me a specific time at which contact will be made, and then they haven't. That's a bit of a letdown. I can understand that. But when it's just, I've sent you a text and I expect a text back within 3 seconds, and if that's not the case, then that's something that upsets me. It's like, I feel like that's maybe just too much of an expectation. I did a video a while ago on this specifically, delays. I think it was 3 reasons why people may not message back immediately. It's like, yes, we have a world that is very based on instant communication now, very much based on kind of instant gratification, kind of instant interaction, and that's not realistic. And unfortunately, it's realistic to a point in spare time, that then it kind of drips over into the rest of our lives, when sometimes it's just not. I was really surprised to find that it was really up there on the list of complaints that people make, that therapists have to deal with and stuff like that. And a lot of the treatment stuff that I was reading and that I mentioned the other day was mostly around just changing your thinking, getting whoever's had that complaint to just recognize that you can't be on your phone 24/7. Whatever is right in front of you at the time is potentially far more important than just instantly responding to you. If I know that someone's not doing anything and they're chilling out and we were talking and then they disappear for 15 minutes, well, fine, I'm guessing that they've gone to the toilet, had a shower, gone and had to deal with something else. Yeah, do I want the response? Absolutely. I want to continue that conversation. It's probably been a great conversation. But, it's always a case of life gets in the way, and you have to deal with what's right in front of you in terms of life, rather than solely stuff online. Like, you can try and build yourself a way of incorporating it in a good way. Like, I spend a lot of time on using stuff like Skype and Discord to stay in touch with Hannah. Be we playing games, or be we just enjoying a quiet night of doing other stuff and not really being together in doing something. But it's nice to feel that other person's presence and have those conversations as stuff kind of arises. Certain TV shows we've taken to watching at the same time whilst on Skype or on Discord with one another. All of those things, kind of, yeah, we're using that new technology to keep a relationship that would be far more difficult to maintain in terms of just closeness, communication, all that kind of thing, alive. But now here's a significant but. If I was there and going, right, well, as soon as someone's doing something, I don't care, they still need to message me back. Yeah, Hannah needs to message me as soon as I message her. Well, that's unrealistic. She's doing a lot. She's got her own things to deal with. If I'm with a client, if I'm out at a meeting, if I'm recording a video, then a lot of the time, like, Hannah will be having lunch when I've been recording videos at times, and so or just before or just after or something like that, and so she'll message me. You guys have heard my phone go off at times when it's been her in other videos, when I've had my phone closer by to me, and it's a case of going, right, well, yeah, okay, it's it's gone off. But she can't expect me to forego what I'm doing instantly in the middle of a recording, just stop, just to respond to her. It's not realistic, it's not reasonable. And again, it kind of suggests that one person has to make more effort than the other. Again, relating the delayed messages and the kind of entitled feeling of needing to, you need to reply to me instantly, with the uneven effort where one person is going, right, well, you need to make the effort to contact me directly as soon as I contact you, but they might not make the same kind of effort in return, and yet they won't be called on it. We see that kind of thing in a lot of relationships, especially certain high-profile relationships, certain reality TV relationships, a lot of things that are posted online about terrible exes and all that kind of thing. Numerous Reddit posts, that detail the expectation between I shouldn't have to do anything, but you should do exactly what I say. And that's not a relationship. That's just not nice. That's using someone else. There have been a number of people, mostly friends rather than clients or people I've been talking to in a professional capacity, but there have been a number of them who've been really attracted to someone, both guys and girls, by the way, really attracted to someone, and it's a case of going, yeah, but then what's this person said back to you? Oh, well, they want they want me to be committed to them, but they don't want to be committed to me. They've got to do this, and they want me to do that, and yet then I'm not able to ask the same in return. It's something of a problem, and I feel like it's becoming more and more of a problem in certain ways, which is why when seeing these things all on these lists of things that other coaches are dealing with, or studies have been done in, or the therapists are having to touch on, I'm sat there going, yeah, well, these all make perfect sense to me. Like none of the things that I've been including in my videos the last few weeks seem strange or abnormal. It's a case of going, yeah, I can completely believe these things. And one of the reasons why, rather than just going off my own thoughts, experiences, and all the rest of it, and I tried to find kind of things that I can work with from provable lists and from things that the therapists have been working with people on and all that kind of thing, was because I was like, yeah, I've got the reservoir of people that I've interacted with as a coach in regards to their relationships, friends who I've helped with their relationships, and my own relationships. That's still quite a small overall collection. Then I extend that into various studies and things like that I've kind of taken note of. But those are only the things that have stood out to me as interesting, or things that have maybe related to me directly. In which case, that was why I went away, did the research, came up with those lists, and then addressed those lists. Because it's a case of going, right, well, yeah, there's more to this. And again, this is where I'm going, okay, well, I'm surprised that delays in responding to messages is so high up. Because I think, according to my list here, it was the third thing that I wrote down. So I'm guessing that it was one of the things that became more prevalent earlier on in what I was kind of looking up and what I was finding, because I was tallying stuff off whilst I was going. And so it's a case of going, yeah, I can believe that it's a regular complaint. Didn't think it would be as frequent as it actually was. Especially when things like staying in a bad relationship was further down. But I'm guessing that that's also because some of the sources that I was looking at were, this is couples therapy, this is couples counselling, this is relationship coaching for a couple, and as a result, the relationships, people going into those places, people going into those studies or into those therapist's office or into the engaging that coach to come and help or any of those things, those are people that have identified that there's a problem and they want to fix it. You can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. So if they are in that situation already, it's probably gone, yeah, well, they want this fixed, they want this solved, and so as a result, yeah, staying in a bad relationship, because that's usually a more one-sided thing, um, is like lower down the list. Because if you've got two people who have maybe got married and they're in a bad relationship and they both agree they're in a bad relationship, then it's easier for them to just go their separate ways. So it's slanted by the sources and things that I was using, but again, it these things will stand out as being interesting, fascinating, and just really important for people to get hold of. Like, again, one of the things that stands out to me that I mentioned a couple of times is how sex education in schools at the moment, be you in the US, where in certain areas sex education just basically doesn't exist, or say over here where it exists, but it's, at least from my experience and the experience of people that I've had conversations with who are younger than me, it's very much a slideshow of the various diseases and a quick run through of how not to get someone pregnant, and that's kind of it. They don't really go into the discussions on the feelings behind it, the support behind it, the way for you to make sure that you're in a good relationship, how to then ensure that you have those kind of balances between people's efforts and between kind of respect of one another and respect of each other's time. Like I mentioned before, I get at times kind of jealous of others being able to spend time with Hannah because I don't get to. And yet, that's not something for me to act out on. It's not something for me to make anyone else's problem. And it's definitely not something that I should demand fixes for, because it's a case of going, well, yeah, this is just the way that things have to be in my relationship at the moment. And as long as things are going well, yes, does it suck when Hannah goes out and I feel maybe a little alone and I would like to be there with her, even if I was also there out with the same friends and all the rest of it. Yeah, I would love for that to be the case. Does it suck that it can't be? Absolutely. However, that's something for me just to go, yeah, okay, feeling a bit sad because someone I want to spend time with, I can't spend time with. Oh well, time for me to go and entertain myself like an adult, not necessarily masturbation. But that would be, it's a case of going, I need to find something else to occupy myself. So maybe the like an adult part wasn't the best phrasing I could have used. But hey ho. Ignoring that and moving on. In fact, let's jump straight into the common sex complaints that we were talking about. And I kind of went through some of these in last week's live stream as well, because they were kind of fresh in my mind from recording the videos that you guys have seen this week. Last week, just before I did the live stream on the Monday, after I had the internet problems at the end of the week before. And it's like some of the ones that I didn't really dig into that I mentioned in the video the other day were things like being detached, the effects of illness, the effects or the physiological effects and changes due to having children, and all those kind of things. Again, this all kind of spins back to communicating, and being unafraid to communicate with the person that you care about, because it's difficult. It's difficult to talk about health and how you feel and all that kind of thing with someone that you want to see. You want someone that cares about you, that loves you, to have the best possible impression of you. It's why we do stupid things to get into relationships and stuff like that. We show off. It's why you see in the animal kingdom the birds that do the daft dances and make the huge nests, or why sharks will bite each other to test each other's strength, and resilience. So that they're passing on the best genes for survival, which is one of the reasons why sharks have barely evolved in the last several 100,000 million years or whatever. I think it's something like 35 million years that they've not made a significant jump away from the shark body type. And so it's a case of going, well, look, if you've got an illness that's impacting your sex life and your relationship, if you're finding it hard to connect because you're not getting the back and forth in an emotional sense, if you've just had kids and you want to get back to normal, but obviously your body has, or at least a wife's body has changed, or a female partner's body has changed due to having children, that's something that, again, you can seek information about, you can seek help for, but you're not going to be able to action that in the best possible way unless you've got access to each other. Unless you've got the support of one partner and the access to the one that's suffering, then trying things, communicating around things to try and find out what they want, all that kind of stuff. That's where the important things happen. That's where all the communication has to happen. And yet again, that fear of confrontation, that fear of upset, that we talked about in terms of general complaints, can have a huge impact on those things just not going anywhere. Especially things around the impact of having children and the physiological effects that can follow. That's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Especially to people who are going into that situation. It might be talked about to one degree or another during, depending on how engaged they are with various classes and other bits and pieces that they can jump into. But it's something that doesn't get generally talked about beforehand. And so in a lot of instances, especially a good number of young people that I've talked to, there's this expectation of going from what you were before having a kid to having a kid to then almost snapping back, healing up, returning to normal. A few changes to things like breasts and things like that are more obvious, but other than that, there are lots of there's an awful lot of misconceptions around what happens there. And yet, even if one partner knows, fine, it doesn't help unless the other one does too. But then that becomes a conversation that needs to be had. And yet, again, fear of upsetting someone else by going, oh, well, actually, we can't do what we used to do, or it will be more difficult to do what we used to do, or I'm going to need more time until we can do what we used to do. There's that fear of potentially disappointing and upsetting someone that you want to see you in the best possible light. And that's tough. It can be incredibly tough. And yet it's a conversation that needs to be had. These are all things that need to be moved past for the best possible relationship. Same again with how people want potentially entirely different types of sex. And I'm not just talking positional preference or anything like that, but talking very specifically kind of different types of stimulation, and all those kind of things. And unless those are talked about, unless those are discussed openly and in a reasonable fashion, then it's not going to happen, is it? It's I can speak from experience where when it's a case of going, yeah, fine, I would like more, but I'm not going to say anything. Or I would like something different. I'm not going to say anything because of the situation that I'm in. And maybe it was because it was a short-term thing. Or maybe it was because there were other expectations. Or because I felt less experienced. Or because I was worried about if I was performing well enough in the first place. How can I ask for more if I'm not even hitting a basic standard? younger Seb with a lot less confidence and giving far more shits about what other people think in the moment. But it's a case of, if you're having those kind of thoughts, you need to be having those conversations, because the only way you're going to get past them is by having a chat, sorting it out, seeing what they want. Maybe they've been afraid to ask for something or ask for a change, and so the two of you have been having a very, very vanilla physical interaction, physical relationship, and yet really and truly neither of you want that. Maybe there's so much more outside of that the two of you would like to indulge in, but you just haven't had the balls to ask one another. It's all things that need to get kind of carried across and worked with and interacted with, because otherwise it's not going to make the slightest bit of difference. And that same sits for mismatched sex drives, which actually came up on both the list of complaints about sex in relationships, as well as just the complaints about relationships generally. The mismatched sex drive thing is just prominent because, rather unsurprisingly, our relationships are based around sex. Like, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Even some of the people who are the most puritanical in the world cannot deny that relationships are built on more than just love. Yeah, they have a purpose. Usually the purpose is if you go to the very, very root of everything, creating children. But you will be hard pressed to find anyone globally, regardless of how religious they are, how politically focused they are, or anything like that. There is more to a relationship than just two people being close. Because two people being close, even very close, would potentially mean friendship, good friendship. But when it comes to love and sex and things like that they are a requirement for a romantic relationship, at least to a degree. Yeah? Like, I'm not necessarily saying that you need sex for a relationship, but you need some kind of physicality. A kiss, a hug, holding hands. There needs to be something more than just a closeness to a person. And so, when that's laid out like that, it's a case of going, yeah, okay, that's why mismatched sex drives is such a problem, so that it turns up twice within the lists that we've done the last week. It's this thing that needs to be there, that has to be a pattern, because otherwise... Oh, are we breaking? Are we breaking? Oh, and are we back? Okay, I think we're back. If we're not back, I can see people watching. If we're not back, guys, then hopefully we are. But if we're not, then you won't be able to tell me. But if we are, you can say hi. I don't know. But anyway, going back to it. Yeah, the mismatched sex drive problems are they're just so prevalent, and they turn up in so many different places, and obviously every person is different. Everyone wants different levels of stimulation, interaction, all that kind of thing. But there are ways past the limitations in so many different ways. Possibly even ways that then promote a healthier sex drive from the partner that was lacking, or generate more of a dynamic between the two of them, so that it becomes more fun, which means they both get more involved and it becomes more of a bonding experience. There are so many things that can stem from that, and yet it always has to start with that first conversation, and that first conversation, especially on mismatched sex drives, can be one of the things that people are really afraid of. Imagine going to your partner and going, you don't do enough to please me, you don't do enough to satiate me, or going, you do too much, you're killing me. Those conversations, those lines there, they could easily start an argument. They could easily start upset. Even if it's something like, you don't do enough to please me, and they don't get angry or anything like that. They just curl up in a ball and feel sad and sorry and bad about letting you down. Upset doesn't always have to be an angry outburst. So, if you care for that person, you don't want that to happen. And yet it might. And that's where people have the fear of it. But in which case, the things to do would be to change the way that you ask. Asking if you can ask a question. Can I ask you a question? Right, okay, cool. Then I'd just like to ask, if we could do more of this. Rather than going, you don't please me, you don't do enough. Make it a case of, could we try doing more of this? With you doing more of this? Lay it out as a question that may very well just get a positive response because it sounds like fun. Or you are literally killing me with how much you're demanding from me. Could we maybe try this instead, where I get to remain alive and yet you are still satisfied? Toys and whatever else that you want to include. There's a lot of different branching ways, and a lot of it comes down to avoid the worry about upset. Ask if you can ask a question, and then actually ask a question that relates to the thing that you want to ask about. Don't just leave flat statements. You can include a statement in your question. Recently it's been really tough for me to keep up with you, so I was wondering if blah, 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 blah. That allows the partner that you're conversing with to know kind of that there isn't, where this is coming from, but then allows for the question to be asked, and the question is the thing that gets the answer, starts the conversation, finds the arrangement of the compromises. No one has ever made a compromise by making a statement. Yeah. At least not just by itself. There have to be questions around it first. Yeah. There has to be fact finding. There has to be discussion. It can't just be a case of walking in and going, well, I want this. This is my bottom line. That's my statement. That's the thing I'm saying. They have to have questions asked of them, and then they have to ask questions back, because otherwise they don't know where the line will move and if it will be agreeable or not. They have to ask those questions to make that compromise. And relationships are all about give and take. It's one of the reasons why I've mentioned several times that, like, the orgasm objective, focusing solely on the finish for sex and stuff like that, when we were talking more about sex and sexual insecurities the other week, it's a case of going, well, it has to be about give and take, and that doesn't, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's always going to be an even give and take. It means that there's got to be a good give and take, one that we can agree with, one that we can get behind, one that allows us to be functional. And it might be that within certain areas one person gives a lot and the other person doesn't, but then in a different area the other person gives a lot. So there's that balance across different areas, rather than just all in that one facet of life and interaction and experience. And so it's trying to move away from that fear of asking, but then when it actually comes to the give and take, don't worry so much about finding that compromise, because lots of people are worried that when they find a compromise, or when they have to look for a compromise, that it'll be miserable, it'll be tough for them to tackle or deal with, or whatever else, or that it'll be that they're being taken advantage of, potentially, that they're being taken for a ride, and not in a good way. One example that kind of jumps into my head was from a couple of people that I knew and they were having a great time of things until they one of them changed job, and on changing job they had to have the conversations and compromise. And I remember the male half of this couple coming talking to me afterwards and feeling like maybe because he hadn't asked enough questions, because he had just been accepting because he wanted to make her happy, that he wouldn't have as much time anymore because of what he had agreed to, and as a result of that, he wouldn't get as much overtime from this new job that he had moved into, and it would kind of boil down to then her being upset with him for not being able to provide as much. And you know, it was a complex and interesting situation for those two people to be in. But again, it came down to, as far as I'm aware, I wasn't privy to every conversation. I was only privy to a couple that were slightly uncomfortable. But it was a case of, you know, the more questions they asked, the more discussion they had, the more it fleshed it out, readjusted that compromise a little more. And you know, after they had got over the fear of being taken advantage of, or upsetting each other, where they were just able to speak plainly, they found the best compromise for the two of them. And as far as I'm aware, they're still together. You know, they're still having a great time. So you know, that's the kind of thing to keep in mind when it comes to this kind of stuff. You know, it has to be that give and take, that communication, wrapping it right back round to the beginning of what we were talking about here in this live stream. You know, you need that good communication that kind of stands out and works with others. Now, we've only got, I'm thinking I'm going to end this one at 4:30 today, so in about 5 minutes, rather than running it all the way to 5 o'clock, just as a kind of an experiment, just to see if the gap helps YouTube kind of leave this to sort itself out whilst my 5 o'clock video for today goes up. So you know, thank you very much for the guys who have stuck around. For you guys who have stuck around for the whole thing, we've had a couple of people jump in, jump out during, but you know, I appreciate you sitting through the whole thing, or at least most of it, from whenever I think one of you got here about 5 minutes afterwards, and the other one maybe about 10-15. So you know, thanks to you guys. You know, if I'm hoping that it was interesting. And again, I reiterate that if you've got any questions, you can drop them down there now, and I'll quickly touch on them, or you know, drop them in the comments once this video goes up as an archive, and I'll look through them and try and respond to them in other videos, or maybe in the next live stream next Friday. But yeah, I just want to kind of finish this off now, give the half an hour between this finishing and my other video going live to see if it makes a difference. And I might start doing that a little more over the next couple of weeks as well, just doing the 1 hour instead of an hour and a half, just to see if it makes a difference to that video going up after this. But either way, guys, you know, I hope you're still finding these videos on relationships and sex and all that kind of stuff useful. Going into some more over the next few days. I'm taking a bit of a break from it on Monday because something else popped up and I just wanted to talk about it. But otherwise, we're going to be talking this coming week around 2 issues revolving around trust, which I suppose trust comes into divorce, you know, in a way. But no, around trust, one major issue that a lot of relationships have around trust, and then just trust and things that you can do to build and maintain trust in your relationship as well. And then also, I did want to talk about divorce because I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it kind of trending at the moment, where a new study has come out to talk about millennials and divorce versus baby boomers and divorce. And so I want to kind of just take a look at that and have a think about it, just talk around it, considering we've been talking about relationships again for a bit, and how, you know, the whole divorce marriage thing can kind of play into elements of that through looking at this study and the information that it pops up. You know, I'm yet to marry. I have my very strong opinions on marriage to one degree or another, but that's what's coming up over next week. Otherwise, as said, we've got a video coming out today at 5 o'clock in a half an hour, which is me and Hannah beating each other up in the last video of our Conan Exiles Arena kind of arena build testing series, I guess. But otherwise, guys, you know, I'd love to hear any other thoughts, any other things you'd like me to talk about, any other things you'd like me to make videos on. You know, drop them in the chat, leave them in the comments afterwards. But otherwise, it's about time for me to finish, to let the half an hour run. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you guys, well, in the video at 5 o'clock today. Take care.